Going into this game, I wasn't sure what to expect, especially just all the stuff around it and kind of just my history with the series up to this point. But like, I really wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. And it kind of got me back into Pokemon, which is, something I just didn't think was going to happen. For some context, I've been a Pokemon fan since the very beginning. I started actually playing the games during Gen 2 when I got my first Game Boy Color. I've loved basically every game up to Gen 6. Around Gen 7, I kind of hopped off the Pokemon train a little bit. I still played through it and, I mostly enjoyed it for what it was, but I just wasn't becoming a fan of kind of the direction it was going in. I also played through Pokemon Shield, and that game just kind of solidified that like I'm not really into this series anymore. There's just a lot of stuff around the games that like became less what I'd known and loved them for, so just wasn't really my thing for a while. And then Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was coming around as well, and I just like totally skipped that. It just did not look good at all to me. So, and then Legends Arceus came out as well, and that one looked more interesting, but I still just kind of got this sense that like it's a little underdeveloped and half-baked. So I kind of just like, swore off Pokemon basically after Gen 8. Then I remember the kind of reveal time for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and like just seeing it, it's like, dude, it just looked pretty bad. So yeah, I'm done with Pokemon. I'm not going to play this series again. It's unfortunate. It's a thing I've loved basically my whole life. It's just been kind of a bummer for the last few gens, but last year I played through Pokemon Yellow for the first time. I had played through Gen 1 before with Pokemon Red, but I never actually played through Yellow. I played through Pokemon Yellow and it was just like, man, this was such a fun time. I kind of just want to go and experience more of these games again because it's been so long. Around the same time I beat Pokemon Yellow, I had gotten a Switch 2, and I heard there was a patch for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So I was kind of eyeballing it and thinking, you know what, why don't I just try this out? Like, the worst that happens is I don't like it, and like go figure, if I don't like it, it's basically what I've been, kind of feeling on the series anyway. So let me give this a shot. Maybe I'll like it. So I decided to get it, and yeah, I liked it. So just a note, obviously my experience with the game was actually pretty decent because it is running on Switch 2. Everything was basically a solid 60 FPS. I only had a few hitches here and there where the game would freeze, but in general, like, it was a very solid experience. Even the resolution was great. Obviously, the visuals are pretty bad in some aspects, and the high resolution made that look even worse probably, but hey, you know what? I'll take it. Other than that, I'll be talking about some spoilers here and there, so if you haven't played the game, obviously, like, go play it. I think the thing that surprised me the most coming off of this game was the fact that like there was something about it that really brought me back to playing the original games again, and I think that mainly has to do with the sense of adventure that this game has. I feel like around Gen 5 and kind of onward, there's been more of a focus on an actual story in the games, and that's kind of always taken me out of the games a little bit. Not that like having a story in these games are bad, but like I've always loved Pokemon for just like being able to go on my own adventure with my own Pokemon and kind of experiencing it like the way I want to. Around Gen 5, it's like anytime you get to a new town, you kind of just get bombarded by, your rivals and your friends and stuff, but it's like it happens so constantly like from Gen 5 onward, and it's just like something I kind of wasn't jiving with for the longest time. And I do plan to go through those games again and see how I feel on them now. I'm sure I'm probably overblowing it in my memory banks or something, but I've always just loved the sense of like Gen 1 through 4 where it's kind of just like you're going out and there is a story, but it's not so much like the focal point of the game. It's been on the adventure in the Pokemon, and it's crazy how Scarlet and Violet kind of brought that back, like at least for me. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is an open world and you can tackle like the game in any order you want to, and you can go anywhere you want to. You don't actually have to interact with the story until you decide to interact with the story, so you don't have NPCs stopping you anytime you get to a new town or anything like that, and it's just like, man, there's a breath of fresh air. I think it was a change that like the games really kind of needed in a sense, because like there is still a story in this game, and I'll talk about it in a little bit because I actually think it's pretty decent, but it's just so great that like it's not like the focal point, at least like when it comes to the adventure. So I really appreciated that about this game. So the game takes place in a region called Paldea, and it's, again, like kind of the first open world Pokemon game. Overall, like, I think it's a really cool region. I think it has a lot to offer. I think it's got a lot of fun kind of different biomes to explore, and I thought like getting to new towns was always really cool and kind of a special treat. And the fact that like everything actually felt believable in scale. Like these towns are actually stuff that could be lived in and kind of explored. Even just the fact that like there's so many like little hidden areas in this game and like actual like spots to explore. Because I feel like around Gen 7, they kind of just like scrapped all like hidden side paths. It's always like very just linear, like point A to point B. And I feel like there's so many different like little like nooks and crannies to explore in the Paldea, and it just made it so much more kind of fun and just like interesting to, get into. And specifically, like, they have caves that you can actually explore now. I feel like it's been a while since we've gotten a good like cave to explore. And another cool thing about the world itself is that they actually have Pokemon roaming around freely in it. So that's a new addition to this game. Obviously, they kind of experimented with it a little bit in Sword and Shield. And I think Pokemon in the overworld were actually introduced in Arceus, but I haven't played that game yet, so I actually don't really know. But yeah, having them actually roam around freely within Paldea was like such a cool and kind of different thing for me. It actually made it so like every area I went to, I made it a thing to like seek out all the new Pokemon I hadn't seen yet. And that was a thing, like even dating back to the original games, I never had any desire to catch them all. This is the first game where I decided, like, you know, any area I get to, I'm going to try to catch every single one I see. And I think that really is because you can see every, you know, Pokemon on the overworld. It was a fun thing to do. And I actually completed most of my decks. I got all the Scarlet exclusive Pokemon. I'm still missing the Violet ones because obviously I didn't play that game. But it just made getting to areas that much more fun and like actually like incentivized me to like, you know, go around and search for new stuff. So I also caught my fair share of like shiny Pokemon as well. I even got one specifically that I wanted in my party anyway at one point, so that was like really cool. And speaking of my party, I decided to actually go with Fuecoco. I just thought he was kind of the cutest of the bunch. And you know, I do think Skeledirge is pretty sick, so at the end I was like, hey, this is a pretty good choice. I also picked up a Palmy in the very beginning, and he was basically my MVP of my whole party. Like, he basically helped me catch every single Pokemon because I could just paralyze them and, you know, kind of just use his moves. So shout outs to Spiky. Also had a Tinkaton in my party. I just thought it was super cute, and like its big hammer is like incredible. So like, hey, you're gonna do some damage. You're getting on my team. I also got Lokix in my party. I just thought he was like a really cool design. He reminded me a lot of the Skells from Xenoblade X, so I called him Skell. And yeah, just a cool little bug man. Very cool. Also got Espathra on my party. I just thought the design was like super cool, and you know, psychic as well. Psychic Pokemon are sick. So, and then yeah, for the shiny I had on my party, I actually got a shiny Palafin. You know, obviously it was a Finizen at some point, but I actually got someone online to help me evolve it. So was really cool. And the fact that like we finally got like our first kind of dolphin Pokemon, like, hey, that's pretty sweet. I just had a great time going through Paldea with them and, you know, obviously taking on all the challenges with them. There's Koraidon as well, and he's kind of in my party in a sense, also kind of not, because you can't really use him until like after you beat the game technically. I thought he was a cool addition to the story. I thought it was cool how they incorporated a legendary kind of the way they did. Because he's like kind of a method for the story to be driven. He's also literally a transportation method to be driven. And, you know, eventually he ends up on your party. So I just thought it was cool how they kind of included him into the story and kind of like all aspects of the game. As far as the combat goes, it's basically like every other old Pokemon game, and that's totally fine for me. I love the turn-based approach to these games. In this game specifically, they added terraforms, which actually kind of opens up the gameplay quite a bit in terms of having different typings for your Pokemon based on what their terraforms are and stuff, which I didn't delve into personally too much. I know that is something you can spend a lot of time on, is like perfecting like all that kind of typing stuff, but I didn't really feel the need to, just going through the story, so it's not something I delved into too much. And something new to this game as well, I think, unless they introduced it into another game that I haven't played, but they have auto battle now, which you kind of just like send out your Pokemon in the open world and they kind of just like go around like killing other Pokemon if they're high enough level or if they have a, you know, type advantage and stuff. It's not something I use too much either, but I do think it's a cool concept, but something that should probably be expanded on in the future, because I do think it feels a little underdeveloped in its current form, but still a cool way to just kind of like farm XP if you need to get some extra XP and stuff. So as far as the story goes in this game, the general setup is kind of like you get an assignment from your school, which is basically to find your treasure, and it's kind of, you know, very vague. I think it's kind of on purpose. So after you get that assignment, you get laid out 3 different story paths for you to choose, and you can really go down them in any order you want to, in any way you want to, which again I think is super cool. But regarding the stories themselves, there's one called Victory Road, which is basically like, you know, every other old Pokemon game. You go around collecting the gym badges and eventually get to the Elite Four and become the champion. And I thought it was a fun time. I've always just liked going on the adventure of just like, you know, collecting the badges and, you know, doing that whole basic thing. I thought Nemona was a really cool rival. Like, she's kind of basic in some aspects where it's just like, oh yeah, your friendly rival again. But the fact that she'll kind of like tailor her party to kind of where you're at, I thought that was really cool. It's not just something where you're like, you're on the same path. Like, no, she's like way ahead of you, and she's kind of there cheerleading you on to like, you know, become the best you can be, so she can have a rival to really just kind of like go head to head with. So I thought that was a really cool kind of a different take on the rival. I also thought it was cool that like the Elite Four would occasionally show up during your adventure. Specifically when you were at the gyms and stuff, they would kind of just like peek their head in and talk to you, and it's pretty cool how they kind of implemented them into the story so you actually get more of a grasp on like who these characters are. Because even in the older games, it's just like, here's these elite like people you've never seen before, and it's like, oh, they're intimidating, but it's like, I want to know more about them, and you never really get to in the older games. And yeah, just in general, I had a fun time with that storyline. I just thought it was, you know, again, basic, but there's specifically a final battle at the very end with Nimona in the like town square. It took place at sunset, like going into nighttime, so then like the city lights were coming on and like everybody was there, and it was just like such a great finale. So like, dude, that was a fun time, and very memorable for me. As far as the other storyline goes, there's one called Starfall Street, which basically is kind of this game's take on the evil team. So the evil team in this game is not really an evil team. It's kind of like a team of like bully kids who go around bullying other kids, but it turns out like they were actually bullied before. So it's kind of like they teamed up because they felt like they were outcasts and they were picked on. And it was kind of a fun take on it. You know, it's not like my favorite storyline or anything, but I think by the end I actually ended up liking it quite a bit. Specifically with Penny, I thought it was like kind of crazy how like even in her own story, she wasn't really a part of it. When talking about the star bosses, like she never actually interacted with them face to face or anything. And I think that's because she felt like so much of an outcast. It's like, it's actually kind of sad in a way, you know? So kind of the way you would tackle the star bases is like, it was actually like the auto battle segment of the game, because you would just send out like 3 different Pokemon to take out like 25 of their Pokemon every time you got to their base. And if you did that within the time limit, you would actually fight the Team Star Boss. I thought they were a super cool bunch of characters in general, but yeah, just a very fun story. And well, not fun, it's actually, like I said, kind of sad. But then lastly, for the main storylines to go down, you have the Path of Legends, which I think kind of takes from some of the Legends Arceus stuff. Again, I didn't play that game, so I have no idea, but my understanding is like there's a Titan Pokemon in that game that you kind of have to take down. You know what, now that I think about it, I think in Sun and Moon there were like totem Pokemon, so maybe this is kind of a spin on that. Like, I'm not really sure, but regardless, the point of this one is like you're helping a kid named Arvin, who you actually end up getting Koraidon from in the very beginning of the game. But you're helping him take down these Titan Pokemon specifically to find this like stuff called Herba Mystica, which it turns out he's getting to help his Mabostiff basically come back to life. He's had this Pokemon for a long time and it really got sick during a fight, and it's like, man, if we're talking about storylines that got me, like pretty much that one, dude. Like, cause it was very sad and like very relatable. If you've had animals before who've suffered and stuff, it's like, dude, I get it, dude. So it was a pretty hard one actually to play through in a sense. I mean, again, it's like obviously it's like a kid's game and stuff, but it's like these themes are there and like the heart is there and everything, so it's like it was a good moment. You end up helping him and stuff, so it was cool, because then even at the end you get to like fight Mabostiff and fight Arvin, and it was just like overall just a great storyline. That was definitely my favorite of the 3, and yeah, the Titan Pokemon themselves were fun to fight. I just love how they kind of have like actual like Pokemon boss fights now. It feels like something that's kind of been missing from the main series for basically ever. So after you beat the 3 main stories of the game, it all kind of culminates into one final story of the game that revolves around this place called Area Zero. Basically, no trainers have gone there for years. There's just something off limits about it. You're not allowed to go in there. The story takes place there at the very end, and you team up with Arvin, you team up with Penny, as well as Nimona. It's this really cool finale where all 4 of you go down into Area Zero, and it really is this like super mysterious place. Like everything from the music to just the atmosphere, and it's like peaceful but also ominous. There's just something weird about it. I've never really felt that from a Pokemon game before. At least not maybe like some of the modern ones. It's been a while, but just a very kind of a creepy but also like calming vibe about this place. I super loved it. Kind of as you're going down into Area Zero, you come across these research stations that give you little updates on Professor Seda, which happens to be Arvin's mom, if I didn't mention that. So you're kind of getting little story bits about like what's happened with her and what's going on. And as you keep descending into Area Zero, you're getting more like storyline stuff between Penny, Nimona, and Arvin, and they're all kind of talking about like their past, and like it's cool to see like them all come together for the first time. Then you eventually get down to the very bottom of Area Zero, and that's like where the whole climax climax of this game takes place, and it's like actually pretty crazy. It turns out that Professor Seda was actually dead throughout the whole game, and you're actually getting talked to by her AI, which she created to help her work, more efficiently. So it's just kind of a crazy revelation at the end, and obviously for Arvin it was like pretty world shattering, and it's just like, oh my god, like this is actually crazy for a Pokemon game. And like, it's not that the AI is necessarily bad itself, but it's like programming is like, it's supposed to see her dream through, and her dream was to bring all the Pokemon from different like universes to like Paldea through the Paradox stuff. That's why the Paradox Pokemon were there in the first place. It was basically she was leaking them out. So you have to end up fighting her AI in the very end, and it's just like this like really cool final boss fight. Even Koraidon gets to like chip in for the first time, and it's kind of a scripted event, but it's like, dude, it's cool to see him finally get his like time to shine, and it was just like, dude, like I couldn't concentrate because my cat. But yeah, just a super crazy end. I was really not expecting any of that to kind of go down, and seeing Arvin's reactions and stuff is like, dude, this guy is just like going through so much crap. Like, so after all that kind of transpires, the final shot of the game is you, Penny, Arvin, and Nimona, and it's just like this moment where you guys are all like kind of walking into the horizon, and it's like, man, like I don't think I've experienced like loving an ending to a Pokemon game as much as I have with this one. Like, it kind of left me with the feels in a way. Just like the perfect ending to this game, man, which again, I wasn't really expecting to like as much as I did, but just like, and specifically with the story stuff, because like I mentioned before, it's like I've never played Pokemon games for the story. I've always played just for like, going on the adventure with my Pokemon and just like carving my own story. So just the fact that like the story kind of like latched on as much as it did is just like, man, really wasn't expecting that, and I really appreciated it. And obviously there's some stuff here and there that like could have been ironed out more, but just overall, like it left me with like good feelings, and like that's kind of all you want at the end of the day. It's just something that can make you kind of smile and happy. So hey, it did its job. Some of the other things I kind of want to praise that I left out earlier, the animations of the game. Like, I was kind of surprised by how like lively and just full of charm everything was. Specifically like the gym leaders and stuff. Like, they all had these like really cool stances, and like Iono, I think that's her name. The one with the shark teeth, I don't remember, but seeing her kind of jumping around and just like throwing her Pokeball out and stuff, it's like, man, it's like such a fun time. I thought the music was pretty decent as well. It did sound kind of low. For some reason, I had it like actually turned up all the way, and I had sound effects turned down and stuff, but there was a lot of like instruments and stuff I couldn't hear until I heard it like on YouTube listening to it. But yeah, just some great tracks overall. They also added the ability to relearn moves that your Pokemon forgot, so I thought that was really cool and kind of a nice quality of life feature. And then there's like a big emphasis on sandwich making in this game, which they add like kind of cool benefits and stuff. I didn't interact with it like barely at all. I think only a couple times just to see kind of what it did and stuff. It's a cool addition, just not something I really partook in, so. So as far as some of my gripes go with the game, there's kind of this big emphasis on the school aspect of this game. You're even forced to wear the outfits the whole game. You can't actually change your main outfit, which is like pretty lame, but it is what it is. But yeah, there's a big emphasis on the school aspect of this game, and it's kind of crazy how undercooked and underdeveloped it feels. It's kind of like the main hub world of the whole region is like, this school. And I feel like they don't really incentivize you to go back to it much at all. Like, there are classrooms you take, but it's basically like any other Pokemon school from any of the like games in the past, where it's like, they teach you simple things about like type advantages and battle multipliers, stuff like that. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's cool that they kind of have it like in a newer form, but it's not very fun. There is cool stuff where they talk about like, there's a history class where you like learn about the lore of Paldea. But I feel like other than that, the whole school aspect felt super underdeveloped. Like, you even have a dorm room that you stay in that I think you only have like 2 actual like in-game reasons to go there. And like, you can't customize it at all. It serves no purpose other than those like 2 story segments. I don't know, I just felt like the whole school aspect was like super underdeveloped, and they kind of could have like, done more with it. And like I mentioned before, I really do love Paldea as a world. I think it's really cool, but I actually feel like it's too big. As much praise as I was giving it for that, it's like, it's almost too big. So many areas start to blend together, and so many areas are like filled with the same kinds of Pokemon. So it's like, I feel like they could have cut it like even in half probably, and it would have been perfect. I would get so lost just like going around one little section. It's like, have I been here before? I don't know. It looks very similar. Not that getting lost is bad. It's just like, is it fun if I don't know where I'm going like half the time, and if I think I've experienced this before? Either way, it still worked fine. I just think it might have been a little too big. One big aspect of this game that was kind of a bummer was actually the kind of the way the level scaling worked, and like there is none. There's kind of a set way to play this game, but they kind of give you the illusion of choice because you really can go anywhere, but like if you go all the way up north and you're only level 20, like you're not going to be able to fight anything up there. You're not going to be able to fight the gym leader or anything like that. Oh, there's a phone call. Probably spam. So it would have been nice if they implemented some form of level scaling so you can actually like play the game in, you know, really any order you want to. Something I totally feel they cut corners with was like actually the Elite Four and even Victory Road. It's kind of funny because the actual story is called Victory Road, but like there is no Victory Road. There's a little cave entrance in the academy itself that you go through, and it literally just leads you into this little dirt path with like level 10 Jigglypuffs, and then like the Elite Four building is right there. There's no Victory Road at all, so there's no real build up to the end. It's kind of just like, there it is. And then you get inside the building, and before you do anything, they make you take a quiz. Which is just like, what are we doing here, man? And I actually failed the quiz, by the way, because I didn't know what the towns were and like what the leaders from each town was. I actually got confused on that, so like, I had to redo the quiz, which is like, dude, my hype's already like kind of down because this is like such a kind of bummer lead up to the very end of this like story. So I was like, okay, it just went down even further. So to make matters worse, it's like you actually fight one of the Elite Four members and it takes place like in a cubicle like building. And it's like, okay, maybe the next room will be better. No. The next Elite Four member comes in and it's like in the same room. And it's like, dude, what do we do? Like, this is the end of this story? Like, this is the Elite Four, the great Elite Four of Paldea? Like, this is it? Like, I did think it was cool that like all the Elite Four members were kind of there, like cheering you on while you battled and stuff. But it was like, other than that, like, dude, what a letdown. And then not to mention, I actually faced Gita during the daytime. And it was just like such a bummer of like a whole experience of the end of that storyline, man. It was a good thing that the Nimona fight that happens right after all that stuff, it happened like during the sunset and all that, because like that was super great, but everything like just with the Elite Four and that champion was just like, man, not great for me. So, and then yeah, speaking of cut corners, you can totally see it like in any town you go to, really any place that has like buildings, because you can't enter any single building in this game. Well, aside from like, I think a sandwich shop, I think that's about it. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer because like whenever you get to a new city, like at least in the older games, like the first thing you want to do is like go into all the buildings and talk to all the NPCs and stuff and just explore it. It's kind of a shame that like the cities here are so kind of well realized, but like they're just kind of set dressing at the end of the day. There's not actually like anything to really do in them or explore. Another thing that felt pretty lacking for me with this game actually was its art direction. They kind of went with this like semi-realistic texture look for a lot of the Pokemon and even like the clothing and stuff, and I just don't think it looks that appealing. The game has such an anime aesthetic built into it, you know, obviously from the Ken Sugimori art and just like the anime, like everything. So it's like, why aren't they kind of approaching more of a cel-shaded line art approach? And it seems like they're going forward with it, going into Winds and Waves, and it does look a little bit better. I won't lie about that, but I'm still kind of like, why are we going in this direction? You guys have such a like good cartoony aesthetic, like kind of embrace that and just like go full into that, but whatever. It's just, you know, obviously my personal opinion. It doesn't mean it's bad or good or anything, but something else is kind of personal for me, specifically when talking about modern Pokemon games. I feel like there's been a huge disconnect in the sense of kind of how you actually bond and connect with your Pokemon. You know, I just talked about playing through Pokemon Yellow recently, and the fact that they had like HMs and the fact that they had like no experience share and all that stuff, it kind of made it so like every Pokemon you used was like actually really important to the world and your party. And this game just doesn't have that. A lot of the modern games don't. So I always felt there's kind of a stronger connection in the older games just because you had to actually use your party Pokemon to actually get through obstacles in the world, you know, like trees and rocks and surfing and stuff. And this game specifically, it makes it so like Koraidon is basically the Pokemon that you rely on the whole game because you get around on him, you get different abilities that make him jump higher and climb and all that stuff. And like that's really cool, and that definitely makes him like feel like a nice part of the game and a part of the story. But it's like, yeah, but what about the Pokemon I'm actually like training and actually using and stuff like that? It'd be nice to have them actually do stuff in the open world, not just like running around and, you know, attacking other Pokemon. And even with the experience points, it's like you really had to kind of lock in and like, okay, this is the guy I'm going to use in my party. I got to develop time to developing him and stuff like that. Kind of just the way the modern games approach it is like, okay, everybody gains experience and Doesn't matter if they're doing battles or not, so they're kind of just a part of the team. It is a nice benefit because I do think grinding can be like pretty overdone, and it's like not something that really should be necessary for having fun. But the whole like point of like Magikarp is like, you know, obviously it's a weak Pokemon, but you have to train it in order to like make it a Gyarados. So that's kind of one thing I've not been the biggest fan of with the modern games, is just the fact that like I don't feel as strong of a bond with my Pokemon, and maybe that's just a personal thing, but that's just kind of how I feel on it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Pokemon Scarlet, and again, it's kind of crazy how much I ended up loving this game. I've been out of kind of the Pokemon loop for at least like the past 5 or 6 years. It's just been a series of games that just haven't interested me lately, and I've always loved the series. I've always loved Pokemon. I think I always will, but it's one of those things I just kind of thought was like a product of my past at this point, but these games totally turned me around on it. And you know, I know this one's super controversial, mainly for the visual stuff and the performance stuff, but just overall, it was just a great game. Like, I don't know, I just had a great time with it. It was just super fun. I think a lot of that has to do now with the fact that it is open world and you can approach any challenge in like any order you want. Really, NPCs don't come bugging you like every 5 seconds. And again, that's not a bad thing of the old games, but it's just not something I've always loved about them. So the story itself was really good. I wasn't expecting to like really connect with it as much as I did. I've never been into Pokemon games for the story, but this one super clicked for me. Then obviously I loved Paldea. I loved the Pokemon in it. Just there's so much great stuff about this game. And obviously, like I said, there's like tons of cut corners here and there. There's a lot of stuff that could be like, you know, better. It's not a perfect game by any means, but man, it's a super fun one, and it just totally got me like into the series. And I'm grateful for it for that, because again, I just didn't think I was going to be a Pokemon fan really kind of ever again at this point. So yeah, great games. I'm definitely going to pick up the DLC at some point and really kind of sink my teeth into that and have a good time with it, because it looks like a lot of fun. This was technically supposed to be like part 9 of my go through Pokemon series, because you know, I mentioned it in my Pokemon Yellow video that I'm actually planning to like play through the entire series like straight through. Not every game itself, but like every main game in the main generation. So I already played through Pokemon Yellow, and I literally just finished Silver like not that long ago. So this was supposed to be like a game I played down the line, but I just couldn't pass it up when I got my Switch 2, and it just kind of piquing my interest at the right time. So I'm really glad I picked it up when I did, and yeah, it just totally got me back into the series. I'm like really excited like for the future of it. But other than that, let me know what you guys think about Sword and Shield. This isn't Sword and Shield. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about Scarlet and Violet. Is it a game that like got you back into the series kind of like it did for me? Have you always been a Pokemon fan? Is it just another great game? Or is it just complete dog water?